Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sanova and you are watching A News Now. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Ukraine's Zelensky visits Turkey as Russia and Ukraine continue strikes exchange. The U.S. Congress approves a bill to release the Epstein files and heads for Trump's sign-off. And Iran reveals initiative to host talks between Afghanistan and Pakistan. In the Russia-Ukraine war, attention has once again turned to Ankara regarding peace prospects. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Turkey today in bid to intensify peace talks. At the same time, Russia pummeled Ukrainian cities with missiles and drones overnight, killing at least 20 people.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is visiting Turkey as part of renewed efforts to revive talks with Russia on ending the war. This marks his third trip to Turkey this year. On Tuesday, Zelensky announced a series of key international meetings this week, including Wednesday's talks in Turkey. He said the discussions would focus on intensifying diplomatic efforts and presenting Ukraine's latest proposals to its partners. Ankara will be the fourth capital Zelensky visits in only a few days. In Athens, he secured a gas deal. In Paris, he signed an agreement to obtain up to 100 fighter jets. And in Madrid, he held talks on cooperation with Spanish arms manufacturers. Turkey previously hosted negotiations between Kiev and Moscow, though earlier rounds produced no breakthrough. As Zelensky headed to Turkey, Moscow and Kiev exchanged a wave of drone and missile strikes overnight. Ukraine says it used US-supplied ATACMS missiles to hit military targets in Russia. Moscow says flights were briefly halted at airports in the capital city and Krasnodar after Ukrainian drones were intercepted. And Russia launched a large-scale overnight attack on the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv and western city of Ternopil, killing dozens of civilians. Zelensky said Russia had fired more than 470 drones and 47 missiles, causing significant destruction. Power outages were reported across several regions, according to Ukraine's energy ministry.
Poland says 2 Ukrainian citizens working with Russian intelligence were behind an explosion on a key railway line leading to Ukraine on Tuesday. Prime Minister Donald Tusk told Parliament the suspects crossed into Poland from Belarus shortly before the blast, then fled back over the border before they could be detained. The attack happened on the busy Warsaw-Lublin route, a vital rail link for aid to Kiev. Poland says it will now raise the threat level on key rail networks and deploy the military to protect infrastructure. The Kremlin rejects any role in the sabotage and accuses Warsaw of Russophobia.
These suspects, one of them was convicted by a court in Lviv in May of this year. A Ukrainian citizen was convicted of sabotage in Ukraine and living in Belarus. The second, a resident of Donbass, also crossed from Belarus to Poland with the first suspect this autumn, just before the attacks. Today, we are dealing with an act of sabotage in Poland, which could have resulted in, and here the attackers' mistakes helped us, but it could have resulted in a serious catastrophe with casualties. That's why I'm saying that a line has been crossed, and this is a very, very serious matter.
Meanwhile, NATO held a counter-drone system exercise in eastern Poland on Tuesday. The drill is part of the Eastern Sentry initiative to boost surveillance along NATO's eastern border. It took place at the Deba training area, where soldiers prepared and launched unmanned aerial vehicles using a vehicle-mounted ramp. Brigadier General Chris King says they are looking at ways to keep costs down on new technology while still being efficient.
A Shahed drone costs anywhere from $60,000 US to $100,000+ US dollars. What we're doing today is a tenth of that cost. So that's our major objective is we have got to find lower cost, both sensors and effectors. So again, the system you'll see today is roughly a tenth of the cost of what it's costing Russia to build and employ Shahed-type drone systems.
U.S. President Donald Trump met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on Tuesday. The leaders unveiled significant investment plans and defense cooperation, signaling a new chapter in U.S.-Saudi ties. The Crown Prince faced questions from reporters, and the topic of the 2018 killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi came up, which President Donald Trump said the prince knew nothing about. This report has more.
In a lavish ceremony at the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump welcomed Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, signaling a new phase in U.S.-Saudi relations. The event featured a military band, aircraft flyovers, and a formal black-tie dinner. Speaking in the Oval Office, Trump highlighted major economic and defense agreements with the kingdom.
And I want to thank you because you've agreed to invest $600 billion into the United States. And because he's my friend, he might make it $1 trillion, but I'm going to have to work on him. But it's 600. We can count on 600 billion, but that number could go up a little bit higher. Yes, sir. I don't know. We'll see.
Your Royal Highness.
The Crown Prince confirmed plans to increase Saudi investment to nearly $1 trillion, spanning sectors including technology, artificial intelligence, and industrial infrastructure. On defense cooperation, Trump announced the U.S. will sell F-35 stealth fighter jets to Saudi Arabia, marking a significant policy shift in the Middle East. Regarding the Abraham Accords, the Crown Prince expressed Saudi interest in joining the initiative to normalize ties with Israel while ensuring a path toward a two-state solution. The visit emphasizes deepening U.S.-Saudi ties in economic, security, and diplomatic spheres, while signaling broader discussions on Middle East peace and cooperation.
The U.S. Senate has approved legislation to force the public release of Justice Department files on the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The House of Representatives overwhelmingly approved the measure in a 427-1 vote, and Senate unanimously fast-tracked it without a formal vote. The moves come just days after President Donald Trump reversed his position and urged Congress to vote on whether to disclose the records, following public pushback from many of his supporters. Here is more on this story.
U.S. Congress overwhelmingly voted to force the public release of Justice Department files on the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein on Tuesday. Senators cleared the Epstein Files Transparency Act shortly after the House of Representatives passed its version of the bill in an overwhelming 427-1 vote.
But it is
The measure now heads to President Donald Trump for his signature, 2 days after he abruptly dropped months of resistance. On Monday, Mr. Trump endorsed Republicans' push to publish the Epstein records, calling it a Democrat problem.
what I want.
Before Tuesday's vote, around 24 women who say they were abused by Epstein gathered outside the Capitol alongside cross-party lawmakers, urging Congress to release the files holding childhood photographs of themselves. They later applauded and embraced each other in the House gallery as the measure was passed. Despite his change in stance, President Donald Trump has remained visibly irritated by questions on the matter. When pressed by an ABC reporter in the Oval Office, he called the journalist a terrible reporter.
You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter. As far as the Epstein files is, I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. But I guess I turned out to be right.
Epstein admitted in 2008 to a felony offense involving a minor in Florida and spent 13 months in jail. And in 2019, he was later charged by the U.S. Justice Department with trafficking underage girls, charges he denied before his death in jail in August 2019.
Tensions along the Lebanon-Israel border have surged again after a deadly strike at a Palestinian refugee camp near Sidon in southern Lebanon. Israel and Hamas are offering sharply different accounts of what was targeted, adding to the confusion and anger on the ground.
13 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike near the southern Lebanese city of Sidon. According to Lebanon's health ministry, several others were wounded. The blast hit the crowded Ain al-Hilwa Palestinian refugee camp, one of the most densely populated areas in the region. The Israeli military said it targeted militants operating inside what it described as a Hamas training compound. It said the site had been used to plan and launch attacks against Israel. Hamas strongly rejected Israel's claim. In a statement, it accused Israel of fabricating evidence to justify what it called criminal aggression. Hamas said the strike hit an open sports field used by local residents, insisting there are no military sites in Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. Lebanon's health ministry said at least 4 people were injured in addition to those killed. Early reports indicated the strike hit an area outside a mosque that is often crowded in the evening. Israel has carried out frequent strikes in Lebanon since a ceasefire deal ended open conflict with Hezbollah. Most have targeted Hezbollah positions, but Israel has also struck locations linked to Hamas. The Israeli military said it used precision weapons and conducted aerial surveillance before the strike to reduce the risk to civilians.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for Hamas to be expelled from the region. He made a comment on his X account on Tuesday after the United Nations Security Council adopted U.S. President Donald Trump's 20-point peace plan. The proposal offers amnesty to Hamas members who commit to peace. Netanyahu publicly supported the initiative last September, but his latest comments appear to show there are differences. Hamas has also objected to parts of the plan. Families in Sarajevo are calling for justice decades after losing loved ones to sniper fire during the Bosnian War. A new investigation in Milan into alleged Italian shootings, which were called Sniper Safari in Sarajevo, has reignited hope among survivors as painful memories of the siege resurface. The probe marks the first major step in decades towards accountability for those responsible.
For years, survivors have demanded an inquiry into allegations that wealthy Italians assisted Serb forces in mass killings during the 1992 to 1995 Bosnian War. And now, families in Sarajevo who lost loved ones to sniper fire have renewed their call for justice. The issue was highlighted in international media in 1995 under headlines such as Sniper Safari in Sarajevo, but no official action was taken. Earlier this month, Milan's prosecutor's office opened a case, reigniting long-buried hopes for many families. The investigation is into accusations Italians allegedly paid members of the Bosnian Serb army for trips to Sarajevo to kill people. This was one of the darkest periods of the city's siege, when residents faced relentless shelling and systematic sniper attacks. More than 11,500 civilians, including more than 1,600 children, were killed. For Fatima Popovac, losing her 6-year-old child was unimaginable.
I cannot understand how someone could kill a child for amusement. What harm could a 6-year-old possibly have done? I cannot even imagine that those who carried this out could be human. I wish I could see that monster, what they look like, what they resemble. Do they have no humanity? I cannot wish harm on anyone, even the person who killed my child. God willing, my son will be waiting for me in paradise.
Founder of the Sniper Alley project, Zemil Hodzic, documented the wartime crimes. His 16-year-old brother Amel was killed during the siege.
I would call them murderers. I would call them terrorists. I would call them like killers. Yeah. It says a lot about the world who is interested in this case now because the prosecutor is trying to do the investigation in Italy. But we have known some cases and many other cases with Russians and Greeks, and actually no one did much about it. The fact that we have to fight, we cannot give up. My brother was killed 30 years ago, I'm 42 now. And this mission and the fight for the truth and for the evidence is a lifetime mission, I would say it. And I know they would love me to just shut up. And
in 2021, newly released footage showing snipers targeting civilians reignited painful memories and highlighted the enduring trauma. For survivors, the Milan investigation represents the first significant step in decades towards uncovering the full extent of the alleged sniper-for-hire activities.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss President Donald Trump's Gaza plan endorsed by the UN Security Council and the sharp divisions it has sparked across the region. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. The United Nations Security Council has approved President Donald Trump's plan for Gaza, a proposal that includes deploying an international stabilization force and offering conditional amnesty to Hamas members who renounce violence. The move has generated sharply mixed reactions. President Donald Trump has welcomed the vote. The Palestinian National Authority has endorsed the plan, while Hamas has rejected key provisions. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who initially backed the initiative during a September visit to the White House, now appears to diverge from Washington, calling for Hamas to be expelled from the region entirely. The plan raises new questions about governance in Gaza, the future of the Palestinian Authority, and regional security dynamics. Joining us from Paris to break down the geopolitical implications is analyst Ilan Sialem. Mr. Sialem, thank you very much for joining us on A News.
Thank you for giving me the floor.
Mr. Sialem, how significant is the UN Security Council's approval of President Donald Trump's Gaza plan from a geopolitical standpoint?
Thank you for your question. I think it's geopolitically huge for three reasons, but also more fragile than it looks. First, a US-sponsored Gaza plan endorsed by the Security Council signaled a rare moment of great power convergence on this war. It doesn't mean everyone accepts the details, but it shows that Washington has succeeded in turning its own roadmap into the baseline for the day after, and that's a real diplomatic leverage. Second, for Israel, it marks a genuine shift in approach. Until now, Gaza was fundamentally something to manage, not something to resolve. And that was true long before the 7 October massacres. So a UN-backed plan changed the frame in internationalize Gaza future, offer potential Arab funding and security partnership, but also narrows Israel room for unilateral actions. So it turns a long-standing policy of containment into a debate over long-term governance, which is a major adjustment for the Israeli establishment. Third, and it's an important point, the Arab capitals will read this as both an opportunity and a risk. An opportunity because the plan creates political scape for Egypt, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia to shape post-war arrangements and link them to wider regional normalization discussions. It's a risk as well because their domestic opinion remain deeply hostile to anything perceived as externally imposed or insufficiently protective of Palestinian rights. So yes, it's significant, but the real test is not the vote at the Security Council itself, it's whether the actors on the ground feel they own the plan or whether they treat it as yet another international blueprint they can selectively implement, instrumentalize, or ignore.
Mr. Sialem, what does the inclusion of an international stabilization force mean for the security on the ground, and who is likely to participate?
Well, this international stabilization force is not just a security tool, it's a political signal. It suggests that the international community no longer believes Gaza post-war order can rely solely on local actors. And that a neutral, externally backed mechanism is needed to prevent both a security vacuum and the return of armed factions. So on the ground, to be very clear, it means three things. The first one is the credible deterrence. A multinational force, even lightly armed, can reduce the risk of immediate spoilers, whether remnants of Hamas or rival militant groups. The second one is the buffering. It creates a political and physical buffer between Israel and Gaza during a highly sensitive transition. And the third, which is very important, this is the governance sequencing. It buys time for rebuilding local institutions before handing over security responsibilities to Palestinian structures that are not yet trusted or functional. So crucially, the Arab governments also face today intense domestic pressure. Any force perceived as protecting an Israeli agenda becomes politically toxic for them. So the stabilization force could be a game changer, but only if it balances security effectiveness with regional legitimacy.
Mr. Salem, President Donald Trump welcomed the vote while the Palestinian Authority also expressed support. What explains the Palestinian Authority's endorsement? And also Hamas has rejected the plan. Which elements are most problematic for Hamas and why?
Well, the PA support is less a sign of enthusiasm than a calculation about its own political survival. For months, the Palestinian Authority has been pushed to the margins by Israel, by Hamas, and even by parts of the Arab world that question its legitimacy and capacity. By backing the resolution, the PA signaled that it's ready to be the responsible actor that Washington, Brussels, and key Arab capitals are looking for. There are also a regional dimension. Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states are all trying to shape a post-war scenario that avoids both Hamas returns and any form of permanent Israeli control. The PA wants to show it can be aligned with that emerging Arab consensus rather than left behind it. So it's pragmatic, even defensive, but strategically it keeps the Palestinian Authority at the table at the moment when everyone else is trying to shape Gaza's future. Now I come to your question about the Hamas. For the Hamas, this plan is existentially threatening, and they read it that way. The core problem they have is that the entire framework assumes a post-Hamas Gaza. So even when the text is diplomatic, the logic is clear. Demilitarization, external security oversight, an international stabilization force, and a governance structure that exclude armed groups. So for Hamas, that isn't a political compromise. It's the end of its model of power. So Hamas rejects the plan, not because of one clause, but because the entire architecture is built on a world in which Hamas no longer determines Gaza's future. So for them, that's simply incompatible with their raison d'être.
Mr. Salem, how might regional actors, especially Egypt, Qatar, and the Gulf states, respond to this stabilization force and the broader plan?
Each of these states view the plan through a different strategic lens, and their reactions reflect their own red line and ambitions. Let's take a different example. For example, Egypt. They approach the stabilization force with extreme caution. Why? Because Cairo wants stability on its border and absolutely opposes any renewed displacement of Palestinians into the Sinai region. So a multinational force, if tightly coordinated with Egypt and not seen as an Israeli security buffer, could be acceptable. But Egypt won't put large numbers of troops inside Gaza. Its priority is controlling spillover and keeping a say in who governs the territory, especially on security and border issues. For Qatar, it's different. They face a more delicate balancing act. It has been the main channel to Hamas for years. They're hosting its political leadership. So supporting the plan too openly risk alienating its partner in the resistance axis. Rejecting it risks losing its status as a crucial mediator with Washington. So Doha will likely position itself as an indispensable diplomatic interlocutor, not as a troop contributor, but as a country that can deliver ceasefire negotiation, humanitarian access, and political messaging to Hamas. It will support part of the plan, then preserve that mediating role. So this is different position. And if I take maybe the last one, the Gulf states, and particularly UAE and Saudi Arabia, they have a different calculus. They see the post-war moment as an opportunity to influence Gaza's future if it links to a broader political reason, including stabilization, reconstruction, and for Riyadh, progress toward a US-Saudi defense deal and potential normalization with Israel. So they may participate financially and politically in the stabilization force, but only under condition. Clear American guarantees, a Palestinian political process they can defend domestically, and real limits on Israeli unilateralism.
And in your opinion, how could this UN-backed initiative affect internal Palestinian political dynamics between Gaza and the West Bank?
Well, this is really difficult to say, but it could shake up Palestinian politics in a way that are both destabilizing and potentially transformative. The most immediate impact is that it reopens the question of who speaks for Palestinians. For years, Gaza and the West Bank have operated under two separate political logics: Hamas ruling Gaza and PA governing the West Bank through international recognition and security coordination. So a UN-backed plan that explicitly excludes Hamas suddenly gives the PA a political opening it hasn't had in nearly 2 decades. It allows Ramallah to claim, okay, the international community sees us, not Hamas, as the legitimate interlocutor for Gaza's future. But this can be cut both ways. If the PA tries to return Gaza without real reform or legitimacy, it risks being viewed as externally imposed. And many Palestinians, especially the younger generations, see the PA as weak, corrupted, and increasingly disconnected from their daily reality. So a forced comeback could deepen international resentment rather than unify the system. So the plan creates the possibility of Palestinian political recalibration, but it also risks reinforcing the very fragmentation it aims to solve. Much will depend on whether the PA can present itself not as a returning administrator, but as part of a broader, renewed Palestinian political project that speaks to both territories, the West Bank in one side and the Gaza Strip in the other.
Ilan Sialem, thank you very much for your time and insights. We truly appreciate you joining us from Paris. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll examine Zelensky's visit to Turkey and whether Ankara can revive stalled Ukraine-Russia peace talks at a moment of escalating strikes and shifting battlefield tactics. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Regional tensions in South and Central Asia are back in focus as Iran announces a new diplomatic effort aimed at easing the strained relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more details from Kabul.
Iran says it will host a high-level regional meeting in mid-December, bringing together all of Afghanistan's neighbors along with Russia and China in a bid to defuse escalating tensions. Deputy Foreign Minister Sayed Khatibzadeh told a Russian media outlet that Tehran is working to establish what he calls a contact group on Afghanistan. The agenda, he says, will center on major regional issues, with an emphasis on supporting stability in Afghanistan through joint mechanisms. According to the Afghan Foreign Ministry, Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi stressed that preserving stability and boosting regional cooperation remain top priorities for Kabul. But the diplomatic push follows weeks of heightened tension as Qatar and Turkey mediated 3 rounds of talks between Afghanistan and Pakistan in Doha and Istanbul. But the last session ended without any breakthrough. Pakistan says ongoing security threats make talks with Kabul impossible. Its interior minister warns Islamabad cannot engage politically under current conditions. Meanwhile, Pakistan's defense minister accuses India of involvement in attacks from Afghan soil and says regional powers including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran and China are calling for an end to cross-border incursions into Pakistan. The mid-December meeting in Iran is now being viewed as one of the few remaining diplomatic channels capable of cooling tensions. Whether it succeeds may shape the region's security landscape in the months ahead. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
The 9th International Banking Forum has opened in Baku, bringing together financial and tech leaders from the region. Over 2 days, participants will discuss the shift toward cashless payments and the pace of digital transformation. The agenda focuses on strengthening systems, improving standards, and developing more efficient banking solutions. The program also showcases new tools shaping payments, security, and customer services. As the sessions continue, experts outline the trends and challenges driving the next stage of digital finance.
There are certain markets who are reducing the quantities of self-service devices due to cashless society, let's say it that way. But this market is still needs ATMs to be in place, and all the digital money, let's call it that way, cryptocurrency or whatever transactions is applicable on self-service devices as well.
I think that digitalization and standardization are still ahead of this, what Azerbaijan banks should do. In terms of digitalization, I think you are progressing very fast and successful. In terms of standardization, you have something to do. And that's also our conversation and exchange of views with Azerbaijan banks.
And as to challenges, of course, there are some challenges in terms of digitalization of the rural areas, but together with our stakeholders, we are ready to contribute to this problem. And by bringing the latest technologies, by increasing financial literacy, and by sharing global insights.
When it comes to digitalization, the most complicated task is integration with the existing IT landscape. So it's also both in internal landscape and our external landscape from governmental services, etc. So this is the most complicated task, and all other tasks are really simple.
The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change has formally recognized Azerbaijan's strong organization, professionalism and delivery of COP29 and now plans to expand cooperation. The COP29 presidency met with UNFCCC leadership on the sidelines of COP30 in Belém. The meeting attended by COP29 President Mukhtar Babayev, Operating Company Chair Narmin Yarchalova, and senior UNFCCC officials Wasim Mir and Kristen Adam focused on the legacy of COP29, particularly Azerbaijan's development of skilled staff and volunteers. Both sides discussed involving Azerbaijani experts in future climate events and plan to formalize the cooperation through an agreement soon. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says his country will not veto Turkey's bid to host COP31. He warned that a prolonged deadlock could undermine the unity needed to support Pacific Island nations on climate action. Both Australia and Turkey remain in the race with a unanimous decision expected at COP30.
There is considerable concern, not just from the Pacific but internationally as well, that will not send a good signal about the unity that's needed for the world to act on climate. And if Australia is not chosen, if Turkey is chosen, we wouldn't seek to veto that. What we would seek to do is to ensure that the Pacific benefited from that through measures potentially like a leaders' meeting to be held in the Pacific, by support for the financing, joining Australia with financing the Pacific Resilience Facility. That's so important. So we'll work through those issues. We will prioritise making sure that the Pacific's interests are looked after. But this is a difficult situation because of the rules and the way that they operate. And at this stage, there's still, of course, two countries in the field, Australia and Turkey. They're both being put forward, with good faith, and we're trying to work through those issues.
The first ever conference of Governor-Generals of the Caspian Sea provinces closed in the Iranian city of Rasht on Wednesday, after discussing for 2 days an agenda of furthering regional cooperation among the 5 littoral states: Azerbaijan, Iran, Kazakhstan, Russia and Turkmenistan. Our Turaj Shiraililo has more.
The Caspian Governors Forum concluded in the Iranian city of Rasht, capital of the Caspian province of Gilan, on Wednesday, during which delegates exchanged views on a host of key issues of investment, transit, and environmental challenges concerning the world's largest inland body of water. Gilan Governor-General Hadi Hakshenas officially closed the forum, saying the 2-day event was a practical step to foster cooperation among the provinces of the 5 countries bordering the sea, namely Azerbaijan, Iran, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Turkmenistan. Caspian Governor-Generals on Tuesday took part in 3 panels on economy, investment, and regional development, as well as environment, fisheries, and restoration of the Caspian Sea ecosystem, and also on transit, logistics, and development of the North-South transit corridor. Governor Hakshenas also said at the closing ceremony the fact that all 5 states of the Caspian Basin participated in the Rasht conference indicated the significance they attach to cooperation for addressing the sea's issues. In an exclusive interview with A News TV on the sidelines of the conference, he said the drop in water level and industrial pollution are major environmental challenges of the Caspian Sea. He told A News correspondent the port cities of Bandar Anzali in Iran and Baku in Azerbaijan are 2 main hubs on the South-North International Corridor to connect Indian Ocean to Central Asia, Caucasus, and Europe.
Iran and Azerbaijan have long-standing historical ties and many shared cultural traits. In parts of Gilan province, local communities speak the Azerbaijani language, and sections of Azerbaijan's rail network pass through Iranian territory. For centuries, trade routes have linked Bandar Anzali to Baku. We therefore hope that this border between Iran and Azerbaijan will help expand cooperation among other countries as well.
Iran shares a 650-kilometer coastline to south of the Caspian Sea through its 3 northern provinces of Gilan, Mazandaran, and Golestan. Tehran has nominated to host the Caspian Sea Summit on August 12th next year to mark the International Caspian Sea Day. Turaj Shiraililo, Rasht, A News.
Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan have introduced a new visa-free border trade zone along the Shavad-Dashoguz crossing, easing travel for citizens of both countries. The move comes as Uzbekistan continues expanding visa-free access for several nations this year. Our Sevril Rajapova has more.
Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan have opened a visa-free border trade zone at the Shavad-Dashoguz crossing, creating simplified visa-free movement for citizens of both countries. The facility covers about 6 hectares and includes customs control, administrative offices, warehouses and service centers, designed to speed up the processing for traders, tourists and cross-border workers. Officials say the new regime will cut red tape, reduce waiting times and boost small business trade along the corridor. The project is part of a broader planned expansion. Authorities expect to scale up infrastructure and digitize customs operations to handle growing traffic between northern Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan's Khorizm region. Tourism and trade ministers predict the zone will increase local economic activity and facilitate frequent short visits for family, commerce and logistics. This step aligns with the wider liberalization of Uzbekistan's entry rules in 2025. The country introduced visa-free access for Chinese nationals earlier in the year, extended visa-free and simplified entry for several Gulf states, offered 30 days entry for Jordanians from September, and announced a visa-free regime for United States citizens from January 1, 2026. Officials say the policies aim to attract tourist investors while strengthening regional ties. The introduction of the visa-free zone reflects Uzbekistan's commitment to deepen regional integration and more open economic relations. Iris Civil Vajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Major deals and new opportunities are emerging as Estonian President Alar Karis makes a state visit to Kazakhstan. The two countries are strengthening economic ties with commercial agreements worth more than $500 million. Our Fariza Kalimuzina brings us more.
In Astana, 11 commercial agreements valued at more than $570 million were signed at the Kazakhstan-Estonia Business Forum. On the ground, Presidents Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Alar Karis met with business leaders from both countries, discussing the agreements and exploring future cooperation in transport, digitalization, agriculture, industry, finance and education. Before the forum, the two presidents held a bilateral meeting at Akorda, and President Tokayev highlighted Kazakhstan's interest in gaining access to Estonian seaports, expanding trade opportunities, and maintaining active contacts in international organizations. He also emphasized Kazakhstan's readiness to support the growth of Estonian companies in the local market. Estonian President Alar Karis in turn said that Estonia is ready to serve as a gateway for Kazakhstan to the European Union market. Trade between the two countries has already reached $46 million since the start of this year. And since 2005, Estonia's direct investment in Kazakhstan have exceeded $128 million. And more than 80 Estonian companies are now operating in the country. Alar Karis' visit was the second by an EU leader to Kazakhstan in a month, following Finnish President Alexander Stubb's official visit in late October. And these high-level visits, together with the agreements signed at the forum, underline that economic cooperation between the two countries fits into a broader political picture, with Kazakhstan increasingly seen as a key link connecting Europe and Central Asia, both politically and economically. Fariza Kalimuzina, Almaty, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll take a closer look at the stories shaping the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now we continue with the main topic of the day. President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to Turkey, as Ankara positions itself once again as a potential mediator in efforts to revive Ukraine-Russia peace negotiations. The diplomatic push comes at a tense moment on the battlefield. Russia has launched intense drone strikes across eastern Ukraine, while Kiev confirms it has again used U.S. supply ATACMS missiles to hit targets inside Russia, a move the Ukrainian General Staff calls a significant development, demonstrating the country's unwavering commitment to defend its sovereignty. To help us better understand Turkey's potential role in future peace efforts and what Zelensky's visit signals for the wider geopolitical landscape, we're joined by Hakkı Öcal, prominent political commentator speaking to us from Edremit, Turkey. Mr. Öcal, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Öcal, Zelensky's visit to Turkey comes at a pivotal moment. How realistic is it for Turkey to re-emerge as a mediator, considering the current level of distrust between Moscow and Kiev?
As far as Turkey is concerned, it is always realistic. It's always possible to have meaningful talks with Putin, with Russians, for Ukrainians in Turkey. But you will remember that it was done almost 2 years ago, and there will be no all those deaths or no that destruction in the country if and only if they would say yes to the draft resolution drawn in Istanbul, in Ankara, 2 years ago. But unfortunately, there are some powers on Ukraine, behind Ukraine, behind Zelensky, that are whatever is agreed in Turkey is going to be changed or not good or rejected when Zelensky goes back to his country. I mean, it is like a play, a cat and mouse play. Erdogan will do it again. He will try to convince both sides, Zelensky and Russians, to sit down and talk the problems out. But as soon as Witkoff or someone else from the American side get involved, Zelensky will change his mind.
Mr. Öcal, how might Russia interpret Turkey hosting Zelensky at this stage in the war? Could it complicate Ankara's ties with Moscow? What do you think about that?
No, it wouldn't. I mean, Turkey or Erdogan conveniently convinced Putin that this problem should be solved. As far as Turkey is concerned, as far as Russia is concerned, or any country who depends on the traffic in Black Sea through the Bosphorus and everything. I mean, Ukraine is an important country. Russian trade with Europe is important, but and Putin understands this. And this war was a proxy war, and it should end. And I understand that Turkey's role is not in any way contradicts what Putin is expecting from talks.
But Ukraine has used ATACMS again to strike targets inside Russia. How might this escalation affect the diplomatic environment Turkey is trying to shape?
That I don't know, but I mean, this proxy game, this proxy war is like an operate war. Nobody is fighting really hard fight. Ukraine knows that they cannot harm Russia. Russia knows that they shouldn't harm Ukraine to the tilt. So they are playing a sort of war game. And it is not going to have any impact on the talks, I think.
And also, how is Zelensky's visit being interpreted within Turkey's domestic political landscape, especially regarding foreign policy and public opinion?
Well, you know better than I do, and Turkish-Russian relations and Turkish-Ukraine relations are about the internal politics. Nobody in Turkey, no political party, nobody is contradicting what the government is doing right now. And everybody, opposition party, Halk Partisi, Republicans are accepting whatever Turkey is doing and supporting them. So it is not going to have an adverse effect.
Mr. Hakkı Öcal, thank you very much for your insights and for joining us from Edremit. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
I thank you very much.
You are up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News for more.